And we're live. Welcome to the program, everyone. A lot going on. Very, very big day. Chatter about the governor of California being arrested, and gosh darn it, Gavin Newsom is panicking. But, you know, he's seeing it as a political opportunity for whatever it's worth. A lot of chaos going on out there in Los Angeles, and we're going to get to it because there's some legal issues at stake here, and we want to cover all of that. Plus, I've got a little intel on who may be behind this in terms of the money, right? Like follow the money, as I always say. The money that is being poured into these protests that are happening not just in California right now, but expected to take place in other parts of the country, especially as we move forward into June 14th. That's like the day that these people are citing. They're really trying to, you know, work it all up. And I do want to get to Pete Hegseth on Capitol Hill. Actually, this is really funny. Before we get into everything, I just got to show you this one little clip because I was dying, howling with laughter. You're going to see this a few times.
Mr. Secretary, I'm a little confused. Are you telling me that the folks that are now voting with their commitment to the country are not upset that they're not able to use different pronouns? Is that not a priority for the folks that are now signing up for our military?
Well, sir, if they wanted to get a woke indoctrination, they could just go to college. Instead, they're joining the military, where we're focused on the basics. We know men are men, women are women. Standards will be.
But you get it. That's his go-to line, by the way, on all this stuff. But it was just kind of funny seeing the congressman like, what? Anyway, we begin today with the president talking about arresting the governor of California, one Gavin Newsom, who's like freaking out. Oh my gosh. I mean, he reminds me of AOC. Remember she was sending letters to the DOJ, Pam Bondi, are you going to arrest me? You're going to arrest me? It's like she wants it. Oh, well, this is certain to put Gavin right up onto the national platform so that he can take Donald Trump on and, you know, make a martyr of himself, this, that, and the other. Anyway, then we go to the soundbite that crossed yesterday afternoon. We played it on the shorts feed. I'm going to show you of Donald Trump saying, yeah, you know, I might be okay with that. Gavin, I like him. He's a nice guy, but boy, is he doing a terrible job. And if he's going to stand in the way of federal law enforcement trying to do their job, well, he's going to have a problem. The California governor has been daring Tom Homan to arrest him. Trump was asked, what do you think? Should he?
Should he do it? I would do it if I were Tom. I think it's great. Gavin likes the publicity, but I think it would be a great thing.
Okay, really hard to hear. I know he was outside. There was a helicopter in the background. And so I just want to go back and just paraphrase there. He said, yeah, hey, I'd do it. Gavin, he really likes the publicity. He's a nice guy, but he really likes the publicity. Yeah, he really likes the publicity. He's out there on TV, MSNBC, of course, pleading. Mr. President, have some respect. Come on.
Where's your decency, Mr. President? Stop. Rescind this order. It's illegal and unconstitutional. And I said it. I'll say it again. It's immoral. You're creating the conditions that you claim you're solving, and you're not. And you're putting real people's lives at risk.
Oh, Gavin. He's scared. Actually, he's really not scared. You know what he really is? An opportunist. All of these people are total opportunists, and they're saying, oh, well, okay, we can ignite this. We can sort of just, and suddenly Gavin will be catapulted into the same category as AOC. Remember her, AOC, who said, Pam Bondi, are you going to arrest me? Who went on to NPR saying, well, I am concerned that Tom Homan, when he says he's going to arrest me, you know, and he's referring me to the DOJ. I want to know. I want answers, and I haven't gotten any answers. So here's the short answer. Gavin, no, that's not going to happen. I mean, it could happen if you really, really want to get in the way of the feds. But I don't think they want to give you that sort of grander status. I don't think they want to actually put you in any way on the same playing field as one President Trump. But just think about what the narrative is, right? This is very, very political. Okay, they are using this for all it's worth. They like to say, Trump thinks he's king. Well, how about like the protector in chief? How about the guy who's like, I'm not going to allow these rights? And by the way, you guys have seen the video. It's awful. Okay, you've seen it all. We don't have it here. We don't need to play it because you can get that somewhere else. It's violent. I don't like it. It is bad stuff. So there is a reason to be concerned, and California ought to do its job and make sure that it's not allowing those protests to continue in a violent kind of way, but it doesn't seem to be stepping in. So yeah, you're sending the National Guard. He just announced 2,000 more troops, right? It's a grand total of 4,000 plus the 700 Marines on the ground. And the congressman from California, Garamendi, says, oh, this is all about him just being king. Listen.
And taking control of the National Guard, federalizing it, and saying he's going to double the number of Guards members who are here on the ground. In your mind, do you think this is just about immigration enforcement and creating law and order, or is there something else going on here?
Well, clearly there's something else going here. As was just reported, the LA police and the sheriff's department have the situation under control. The federalization of the National Guard and then bringing in the Marines is something different. This is about Trump pretending that he is the king of this nation, that he has the ultimate power and authority to do anything he wants to do, regardless of law, regardless of tradition, and regardless of the tradition of the state governor in California and every other state really controlling their own National Guard.
You know, I hate to remind him, but there is a reason why the federal government feels very strongly that they need to come in at this particular time. And they're trying to prevent this from becoming too chaotic. And they have the power to do it. You see, there's this little thing called Title 10 U.S. Code 12406, federal statute, which allows the federal government, i.e. the President of the United States, to call into federal service members and units of the National Guard in such numbers as the President considers necessary to execute the laws of the United States. So that's a biggie. And you know what else? You've got the power to call up the National Guard, again, through Title 10 U.S. Code 12406, which allows for the federalization of the National Guard units to enforce federal powers, to protect federal property, even when state officials don't request it. National Guard does not, however, have the power to arrest. So that's interesting. They would have actually needed to use the Insurrection Act, but that's a way higher legal sort of bar to get to. So they went with the easier option here, which enables them to at least get out in front of this and try to protect people. And so, if you look at also what their motivation is, I think it's also in part the optics, right? And the Wall Street Journal accurately pointed this out today, that the Trump administration is hoping some of these news reports and other publicity about its tough enforcement actions will actually prompt immigrants who are in the country illegally to leave the U.S. voluntarily. Migrants have been offered a $1,000 payment if they document their departure. So in other words, they're trying to clean house the nice way. And they're also trying to send a message, right, to people that you're not necessarily welcome if you have an illegal status, but we will help you exit the country and we will pay you. We will pay you to exit the country. But, again, there's this question of, well, how can they possibly do this? What about state rights and all of this? And what I would just go back to is, one, they do have the power to call up the National Guard, again, Title 10, U.S. Code 12406, and then you can get to some of the constitutional powers, guys. And we've been through some of this, of course, because you have so many people that aren't familiar enough. It's disappointing with our Constitution, but you do have lots of constitutional powers that actually afford you the sort of supremacy, if you would, including the supremacy clause, okay? So again, I see a comment and some generous super chat here from Chunk. Did I get that right? Chuck, forgive me, Chuck. Thank you so much. Appreciate your generosity. Great to have everybody here, by the way. Make sure you subscribe, share, like, comment, all that good stuff. We are live, so I see it all in real time. Watch out. Constitutional basis for federal power over immigration. You get the Naturalization Clause, Article 1, Section 8, Clause 4. Okay, the Congress shall have the power to establish a uniform rule of naturalization. Well, this is important because this is Congress. Okay, so even though you got Garamendi on there, the congressman Democrat from California, going on to CNN saying, oh, he thinks he's king, he thinks thinks he's king. No, he's actually just enforcing the law, okay, as it stands. You know, you're in the Congress, Garamendi. You are welcome to try and change the law. And if you change the law, then it would be his duty to enforce that. You've also got the constitutional basis for federal power over immigration through the Commerce Clause, right? We've talked a lot about that. When you have interstate commerce, that's when the feds come in and they are supreme compared to the states. So Article 1, Section 8, Clause 3, the Congress shall have the power to regulate commerce with foreign nations. Immigration is interpreted as being part of this. Again, the Congress could change this. But so long as they don't, then yes, the executive branch does have the power to enforce federal law. You also have federal power over immigration through the necessary and proper clause. You have the migration and importation clause, goes all the way back to 1808. And you've got, I mean, we can go on and on, the foreign affairs and national sovereignty implied powers clause. And this one actually got challenged specifically vis-a-vis immigration out in Arizona as recently as 2012. And guess what? The Supreme Court made it very, very clear that the feds had the power. So if California is not willing to play ball with ICE, and now you're in a situation where it has ratcheted up to possibly a dangerous situation where you have riots in the street that are not really as controllable, right? Or as peaceful as one would like to think, or as the left would like to think, well, then you're running into a situation where the federal government feels that it needs to intervene and bring this sort of law and order. But, you know, that's not going to stop everyone from saying, and I think that Trump has to be very careful of this, right? This is politically a little bit of a tightrope. Because I think as long as people see what's going on and they know what's happening out there, they're going to recognize that you don't want this to spin out of control. You think about, you know, what happened in previous times when these things have spun out of control and you've had to jump in and put federal law enforcement and National Guard on the scene. It's happened, by the way, Rodney King, right, in 1991 or 92. This has happened before, and they don't want to spin it forward to that level or escalate it to that level. So they're jumping in sort of ahead of the fact, and a lot of people don't like it. So politically speaking, yes, it's divisive. And this is why Donald Trump and his administration are walking a little bit of a tightrope. But a lot of people think, and, you know, you look at that video and you see the chaos. A lot of people think, well, wait a second, this is why we elected him. Look at the new CBS News poll that just came out just yesterday, actually, where they were showing overwhelmingly the country supporting the deportation, certainly of criminal migrants. So all of this is heating up, guys, in a very big way. And it's a high stakes sort of gamble, frankly, for both sides, because, you know, Gavin can sit there and say, oh, it's all A-okay and we don't need the federal government coming here. Have some decency, Mr. President. What are you going to, you're going to arrest me? Tom Homan, you're going to arrest me? They can ratchet it up that way. And frankly, you know what? They're going to have the mainstream media on their side. But I would also caution that you don't want to jump in there and do things unless you need to. I think it has risen to the level, again, judging by some of the things that I've seen and the unwillingness of Los Angeles and Gavin Newsom to do anything. Let's face it, guys, they never do. They never do. I mean, look at the fires, for goodness sakes. That was a mess. That was a travesty. And you know what? They you know, Karen Bass is off in Africa to be at some event over New Year's and doesn't even have the decency to be there with her people during a really difficult time. Had to fly back and was pretty darn embarrassed about it. Remember when they asked her questions and she just went into like mute phase? She couldn't even talk. She wouldn't say anything. So there's a lot at stake. The View is all over it. They're saying, like, what's happened to state rights? They're getting their talking points straight from the Democrat Party. Watch.
Now, you know, is it warranted, or does this sort of escalate the situation? I mean, whatever happened to states' rights? I thought that was what you do, because you tell the state, this is what we're thinking of doing. You know, you don't just send people in. You don't just send troops in. But what do I know? I've never run a state. But I don't really, you know, when you come in and everyone is, when you go into the donut shop to look for people and you're dressed in tactical gear, you're creating an issue. You're creating a problem. You want people to come, you've scared them. Even when people are supposed to be there, when they come to talk to the judge. You're arresting them right after. What is going on here?
I think what really matters from sort of a long view here is the fact that he is militarizing and deploying the Guard for the purpose of policing Americans' protest activity, right? Our freedom of speech, our freedom of assembly. And there's a very big, stark demarcation between military troops and law enforcement, public law enforcement, civilian law enforcement.
Right.
And you are an army turned inside to police its citizens can cause chaos, fascism. And so I think.
Okay, so this is like the moment they've been waiting for, right? Let's be really clear. The moment they've been waiting for. This is what Whoopi's been warning of ever since ahead of the election. And now they're looking at a situation in California where these protests are spiraling out of control. Gavin Newsom doesn't want the feds there. The feds feel that it's important to be there and that they can help secure the place and that they can help restore law and order. And so now suddenly it's turned into God knows what, right, over on The View. Let me go to Hegseth, because Pete Hegseth was on Capitol Hill earlier today, and he had an interesting comment to make about all of this. In other words, he doesn't want this turning into a situation that blows out of control, such as we saw, you know, in the streets of Minnesota not too long ago under the leadership of one Tim Walz, who did not have the National Guard stepping in. Watch.
Where in your limited budget, sir, are you going to find, in the remainder of this fiscal year, are you going to pull the money to cover these deployments? What holes are being created?
Well, Congresswoman, thank you for the question. You are right. We're both originally from Minnesota, which is why I recall 2020 quite well, when Governor Walz abandoned a police precinct and allowed it to be burned to the ground, and also allowed 5 days of chaos to occur inside the streets of Minneapolis. The police precinct, ma'am, was abandoned and burned to the ground. And because of that, the National Guard was eventually far too late mobilized. And President Trump recognizes a situation like that, improperly handled by a governor, like it was by Governor Walz, if it gets out of control, is a bad situation for the citizens of any location. So in Los Angeles, we believe that ICE, which is a federal law enforcement agency, has the right to safely conduct operations in any state and any jurisdiction in the country, especially after 21 million illegals have crossed our border under the previous administration. ICE ought to be able to do its job, whether it's Minneapolis or Los Angeles.
I have limited time. I asked a budget
and they
question. Could the Secretary please address the budget? Thank you.
You asked about the situation in Los Angeles, and we believe ICE agents should be allowed to be safe in doing their operations, and we have deployed National Guard and the Marines to protect them in the execution of their duties, because we ought to be able to enforce immigration law in this country, unlike what Governor Walz did in 2020.
Wow. Wow, that was like pretty rough for her. Now, in fairness to her, she did ask about the budget. He like blew right past that. That's Pete. Like, you know, he comes from TV. We know how to do that, you know, better than any politician perhaps. So she's asking about the budget, and he's like, no, here's the deal. Budget doesn't matter, right? Budget be damned. We're doing what we need to do because we don't want a situation. And he's right. I remember that. That was horrible. You think about 2020, the left was like, oh, nothing to see here, nothing to see here. It's like, guys, I mean, they did. To his point, with the burning of the precinct, I mean, that, you know, get rid of the police, defund the police, and Black Lives Matter turned into something that it really never should have. And it was awful. And we paid the price. Frankly, we're still paying the price. And if the Democrat Party were smart, they would recognize that they let that go too far, that got too far out of line. And guess what? It cost them in 2024, because Donald Trump won not only the Electoral College, but the popular vote. All right? So you see how these things backfire? You see what happens? The pendulum swings. And so by allowing that chaos to exist, and by allowing the estimated millions, 20 million by some accounts, of illegal migrants to cross into this country totally undetected, what effectively then happened was you had chaos, and you had a a whole group of people that you couldn't afford. So it wasn't actually good for the country. I mean, you can be all for immigration. I am, believe me. You know what? You want to come to this country, you want to work hard, you want to contribute? Hey, I mean, I'll echo what Donald Trump said in 2016. Let's roll out the red carpet, right? For people that we want here, that want to be here, you can be smart about this. But when you're not smart about it and you don't know who's here, well, then it becomes a national security threat. And then you're dealing with situations that you really wish you weren't dealing with. And so Pete Hegseth is right to say, listen, it is high time that we make sure that this is manageable so that we actually are protecting people. And why on earth Gavin Newsom and Karen Bass wouldn't want that, I don't know. Like, I mean, if it were me and like all HELL was breaking loose and I couldn't manage it, wouldn't I say, hey, yeah, and like work with the federal government to actually bring it under control? I mean, hey, people should be able to protest. Don't get me wrong. I'm a big, queen of the First Amendment right here. So I'm a big believer in our First Amendment, and people should be able to. But when it gets this crazy, that's when you're going to start raising the alarm signals. And speaking of raising the alarm signals, one Anna Paulina Luna is doing that, the congresswoman out of Florida. Wow. So she's been doing some digging. I've been doing some digging alongside her. And here's what's really disturbing, and perhaps this should have been the entire lead of the show. What's really, really disturbing right now is who is behind this, because it appears to be China. Yep, CCP. You know what? They've never forgiven us because they think that we had a hand in those Hong Kong protests, and now all of a sudden they're jumping in, trying to get their fair share out in California, and of course it's a ripe climate to do it in. Anna Paulina Luna releasing this video. Let's listen.
Just found a really great deep dive here from the Data Republican on X. So who is behind all these crazy riots in LA and that will be across the nation? Just like remember in the Summer of Love with BLM, remember who's organizing all that stuff. With this specifically is being funded by an individual by the name of Neville Singham, who actually made his money by pushing communist Chinese propaganda, became a billionaire doing it. He's now funding, and the guy behind all of these protests was also behind and tied to the protests at Columbia University, pushing all of that BS, if you don't remember. And then also, too, if you actually look at the social organization that's putting out these flyers, it's the Party for Socialism and Liberation, which is, and I kid you not, the actual Communist Party. So they're using Hispanics, they're using illegal immigrants, they're trying to hype people up thinking that they care, but they don't care. They would stop illegal immigration. Obama deported people. Why all of a sudden now? It's political.
Yeah, no, she's right. I mean, don't forget, President Obama actually deported the most people. But somehow it's okay when he does it and it's not okay when Donald Trump tries to do it. I'm confused. Oh, except that it is political. And I suspect nations that are not necessarily our friends are looking at this as an opportunity. Again, China has not forgiven us, well, for a whole lot of things. I mean, you can go all the way back to the Opium Wars, okay? Like they which totally separate discussion at some time, but that was Westerners bringing in pretty bad stuff, right, to their country through a very porous southern border. Gosh, funny how history repeats itself. They haven't forgotten that. They also haven't forgotten any role we may have played in Hong Kong. And don't forget, like, this is what happens, right? We've talked about this. We're all big boys here. And the whole idea has always been, let's avoid actual confrontation, physical confrontation. And so we'll use information. And so there's been an effort to promote the quote unquote American way of life, freedom, democracy, et cetera, all over the world. And so in the name of freedom and democracy, we come in, we step in, and we move things along, shall we say. So China knows that we do. Well, China does the same thing, okay? Like, and so does everyone else. So they're looking at this as a ripe opportunity. And so what I would just say to Gavin Newsom is, eyes wide open, buddy, okay? Like, open your eyes, recognize what's going on. Listen to Anna Paulina Luna and listen to what we're saying. Because when she mentioned this name, she mentioned this guy, Neville Roy Singham. And I was like, wait a second, I know that name. And it turns out there was a huge expose on him back in 2023 by the New York Times, because you see, his money is what goes to things like this. Literally, the Communist Party, the Party for Socialism and Liberation, PSL, it is known as. Here we go. This is just a Wikipedia explanation. Ideologies, communism, Marxism, Leninism. I mean, and the guy that is funding it is a zillionaire, billionaire. Well, he sold his company for like $700 and some odd million, so almost a billionaire. If he invested it smartly, he probably is. Although he's investing it in all these various things, PSL and a few others along the way. And it turns out that the Party for Socialism and Liberation is actually a big part of what's going on with these protests in Los Angeles. Okay, so here's the guy. He apparently lives in Shanghai now, and he has an office in the same building where the CCP is running its propaganda out of. So the New York Times did this huge expose, 2023. Okay, so this is not a conservative outlet, right? This is the New York Times. Daily Beast did it too, okay? They're definitely not conservative over at Daily Beast. U.S. tech mogul bankrolls pro-Russia, pro-China news network. In other words, these guys are the SHI you-know-what disturbers, and they're trying to get a message out that's pro-China all over the country. I want to go to the article. So this is what jogged my memory. As soon as Anna Paulina Luna said that, I was like, wait a second. I remember that guy. I remember this story. And sure enough, back in, I guess this was updated in August 10th, 2023, they wrote about a global web of Chinese propaganda that was being led by a U.S. tech mogul. It says the Times unraveled a financial network that stretches from Chicago to Shanghai and uses American nonprofits. Great. So these guys get tax deductions too. It's coming at the expense of you and me. All these NGOs, right, to push Chinese talking points worldwide. Heck, they might not even be getting some of this USAID money. I mean, we might actually be paying for this. That's the crazy thing. So in this article, they start off by talking about how there was this protest in London, and it was this group called No Cold War. And apparently some people came along that were activists supporting the democracy movement in Hong Kong, and the No Cold War people started fighting with them, and it turned into a whole thing. And it turned out the No Cold War movement is one of these Neville Singman operations. You know, he said, oh, no, you know, like, I'm not deliberately trying to promote a Chinese agenda, etc. I've got his quote here where he defends himself. But his friends have all said, yeah, no, he's a Marxist. He's a communist. He totally is. And you know that China wants to basically keep us at odds with ourselves, because the more we're at odds with ourselves, well, the less of a threat we are to them. So this was fascinating. Okay, let's get into this, guys, because this is really serious. I'm going to just blow this up on the screen so I can see it as well as you. All right, take a look. In fact, a New York Times investigation found it is part of a lavishly funded influence campaign that defends China and pushes its propaganda. That was the group in London. At the center is a charismatic American millionaire named Neville Roy Sigmund, who is known as a socialist benefactor of the far left causes. Yikes. What is less known and is hidden among a tangle of nonprofit groups and shell companies is that Mr. Sigmund works closely with the Chinese government media machine and is financing its propaganda worldwide. Gary's metal detecting. Thank you. Send. He wants more troops. Send in. Thank you for the generosity. Appreciate it here on independent media. What's frightening here is that this guy, Sigmund, is using independent media alongside China and whoever else to try and push out their agenda. So from a think tank in Massachusetts, the Times writes, to an event space in Manhattan, from a political party in South Africa to news organizations in India and Brazil, the Times tracked hundreds of millions of dollars to groups linked to Mr. Sigmund that mix progressive advocacy with Chinese government talking points. I mean, even Code Pink. Okay, Code Pink, that's his wife. They got married in 2017. You see her? That's his wife. She's the founder of Code Pink. And it turned out Code Pink used to be really anti-China until she hooked up with him. And now they get all their money from him. So there's this American anti-war group, Code Pink, and it morphed over time. It used to criticize China's rights record, but now it's defending its internment of the predominantly Muslim Uyghurs, which human rights experts have said is a crime against humanity. Okay, all right, so let's take a step back. Like, let's understand what's really happening in California. One, yes, we've had a lot of people coming here illegally. That is not good, never should have happened. There is a definite effort by the Trump administration to get people to self-deport. Hopefully they're successful with that. But two, what do you think this is about? I mean, some people are pointing out Jackie Mack, Soros, yes, and I've seen ties to Soros, but this guy really got my attention just because, he's sitting there in Shanghai, and the New York Times is like, this is what he does. This is now his business, selling Chinese propaganda and using, I guess, independent creators, so to speak, and these NGOs and all these advocacy groups to do it. Whoa, okay, so, hey, guys, Gavin, listen to Anna. Anna Luna Polina is all over this, and you need to focus on what actually matters here right now because it's about protecting the country. We need to be united in our protection of the country. We need to be united in that we're not going to allow this craziness, okay? And yet, don't forget that King thing. Remember what I was telling you about the King thing? This is important because the California Congressman Garamendi, he's using this King bite. This is straight out of the propaganda coming straight from the Chinese. Watch.
And taking control of the National Guard, federalizing it and saying he's going to double the number of Guards members who are here on the ground. In your mind, do you think this is just about immigration enforcement and creating law and order, or is there something else going on here?
Well, clearly there's something else going here. As was just reported, the LA police and the sheriff's department have the situation under control. The federalization of the National Guard and then bringing in the Marines is something different. This is about Trump pretending that he is the king of this nation, that he has the ultimate power and authority to do anything he wants to do, regardless of law, regardless of tradition, and regardless of the tradition of the state governor in California and every other state really controlling their own National Guard.
I mean, unless Gavin's just getting played. Do you hear the use of the word king? Remember that, okay? Because guess what? There's a big king thing going on. Take a look. On the 14th, this week, here's their newest, latest, and greatest. In America, we don't do kings. They've even got a little song that goes with it. I'm going to spare you. I'm looking out for you, okay? I'm looking out for you. In America, we don't do kings. The corruption has gone too far. No thrones, no crowns, no kings. So this is the talking point du jour, okay? And this is, again, these are these nonprofits. And you've got to question who is behind this. On June 14th, we rise up. Find an event near you on the map below. There's going to be a whole nationwide thing going down because they're all going to stand in protest. Maybe Whoopi will be there. To these kings, another one, okay, about no kings. On June 14th, Flag Day, President Trump wants tanks in the streets and made-for-TV display of dominance for his birthday. A spectacle meant to look like, here, I'm losing my place. Meant to look like strength. There we go. But real power isn't staged in Washington. It rises up everywhere. You see what's happening. This is all about them exercising their rights against Donald Trump. Now, don't get me wrong, right? Again, we all have a First Amendment right to speak out. And you know how passionately I care about that. But you know what makes me nervous? When we get the Chinese trying to influence our First Amendment. And so you know what the answer to that is. The answer to bad speech is more speech, which is why it's important that you're here. It's important that we have a very civil conversation where we actually digest what's real, what's not. What is real right now? Yeah, there are a lot of people out protesting in the streets. And from the images I've seen, it is not good. But what's also real is that there are a group of actors on the international stage, including countries overseas, that want to do us harm. So Anna Paulina Luna, I commend her for taking that leadership and getting right out in front of it. I saw it last night. I actually spoke with one of my team members who knows her well, and I was like, wow, Anna's really getting out in front of that. And I said, but I know that name. I know that name. How do I know that name? I know that name because I'll credit the New York Times and even the Daily Beast, okay? So you know what? It didn't come from the conservative media. It actually came from the lefties. And they're pointing out that this guy has Chinese propaganda that he's putting out all over the world. And this is what is tied to what's going on right now here in our country. And that is wrong. I mean, it's unbelievably wrong. Remember, who's the congressman with Fang? Swalwell. Look, it happens, okay? They can infiltrate. We can't be infiltrated. We don't want to be infiltrated. We got to get rid of this kind of propaganda being funded from overseas actors that do not want to see us succeed. Because we are unstoppable. They got to be looking at this like, wow, right? Wow. Speaking of chaos and being unstoppable, have you seen the market? Have you seen gold prices? Let's take a look at gold today. It's like my daily check on gold, right, guys? By the way, we're fully independent here on the Trish Regan show. There's no Chinese money coming in here. Or Russian or anything else like that. But, hey, I like to make sure that you guys are all over your investments. It's partly why I started my own financial research company, 76research.com. We can talk about that later because our portfolios are killing it. And we got a lovely, lovely note from one of our subscribers, one of the founding club members here. So I want to tell you about that. But before I do, first of all, over to gold prices and the market overall, which is trading higher today. I thought it would. I mean, it's really amazing in the face of all this. I'll tell you, investors, they're keeping their calm and they're cool about them. And you got everything moving up except for gold, actually. It's down 0.3%, still sitting near an all-time high. But I'll tell you, that's when I always go in. I'll buy a little bit more today. I always buy when it's going down. If you're interested in buying gold and also alongside it getting up to $15,000 worth of free silver from our show sponsor, American Heart for Gold, I encourage you to go over to trishlovesgold.com to get more information. I encourage you to text Trish to 655-321844-495-1115. Some of our regular listeners here, they know the drill, but text my name to 65532 and they'll give you the full spiel on how you can qualify for up to $15,000 in free silver. We'll get over to the markets again in a bit, but this is an interesting story that's come up recently. Simone Biles. Oh, it's like if the Chinese gotten to her too. The little gymnast, Simone Biles. I mean, she's an accomplished gymnast for sure. I mean, gold medals in the whole 9 yards. Well, she's decided to take on Riley. Terrible slip. Forgive me. Riley Gaines. She's taken on Riley Gaines. Poor Laken Riley. God bless her soul. I mean, she's partly why we're seeing what's going on out there in California. Anyway, Simone Biles is this wonderful gymnast, right? Who probably could have used a little more education. All right, I'll just say it. She needed a little more education. I don't know if she finished 7th grade, really. She did something from home. Because, she was so talented at the vault and those other, cartwheels and things that she was doing that she had to focus on her gymnastics. And so she did not focus on school. And so she doesn't necessarily know the difference between XX chromosomes and XY chromosomes. And somehow she thinks it's perfectly fine for men and women to compete in sports together. This was great. So I saw this the other day and I'm like, you've got to be kidding me. This is her going off on Riley. She said, Riley Gaines, you're truly, it was kind of a mean tweet too. Like not very not very much of the stature of somebody who's a gold medalist. But she said, you're truly sick. All this campaigning because you lost a race. Straight up sore loser. You should be uplifting the trans community and perhaps finding a way to make sports inclusive or creating a new avenue where trans feel safe in sports. Maybe a transgender category in all sports, but instead you bully them. One thing is for sure, No one in sports is safe with you around. I should add that she was also doing a speech, actually, at one of the universities recently, a commencement speech, where she suggested that they have totally co-ed gymnastics because she could win in co-ed gymnastics. So I got a kick out of this because clearly what she doesn't seem to understand is that there is a difference between men and women and their muscular capacity, right? There just is. Sorry, you might have missed that class. I get it. You didn't go to a whole lot of classes, Simone. But Riley said, this is actually so disappointing. It's not my job or the job of any woman to figure out how to include men in our spaces. You can uplift men stealing championships in women's sports with your platform. Men don't belong in women's sports. And I say that with my full chest. A real one. Right? What are we even talking about this, right? Like, how is this even an issue? The trans community used to be like 0.001% of the population. Now all of a sudden everybody's trans and everybody wants to compete in women's sports. And I'm sitting here going, I don't get it. Like, I really, 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 really don't get it. I can understand, okay, maybe you have your issues and, you know, I'm sensitive to that. And maybe you have some mental health challenges or maybe, you know, I don't know. But do you really want to compete in women's sports? Like, you know, pick and choose. Like, isn't there something else you can do? Like, really? Women's sports. Now, what's funny about how Simone is framing this is that she seems to think, guys, that she would beat a man in gymnastics. Now, I'm just going to say this. I think she's conflating a whole lot of things. I think she's conflating sort of men and women. And I also think that she is conflating the sports themselves, right? Because gymnastics, actually, you have an advantage. If you're tiny and small, but lean and muscular, right? You know, really, really muscular, but you're teeny, then that actually goes a long way. And so that helps you. But in swimming, clearly that's not the case. Like, in swimming, you want to be big. And having that extra muscle capacity is really worth it. So my takeaway was, gosh, you know, we got to do a better job educating our athletes, for goodness sakes. You know, the NCAA is now paying them. You can go to college, and we can talk about it another day. I actually have some mixed views on that because I think colleges have gotten a ton out of so many students that really shouldn't be in school. And so let's just call it what it is. It's a business. So fine, pay them, but do they even have to be in school, I guess? I mean, maybe these college sports, whole other discussion for another day and time. But I would say this. Simone did not get much of an education. She doesn't understand basic biology. She doesn't understand even the differences in her own sports. And there you have it. I mean, you also got to wonder how much the Chinese, in a way, contributed to this. I mean, if this is all part of the Party for Socialism and Liberation, and you have all these agendas being pushed by people like this guy who's created this web of Chinese propaganda, like, how much of this is them trying to force their position onto everyone? I think it's kind of a fair and important question to be asking right about now, don't you? Don't you? I mean, wow. But you know what the good news is? And this is what I always go back to, and this is why I am so glad to have my foundation as a business reporter, as somebody who really understands what's at stake. I'm just going to remind you of my own company that I started. I'm looking at the Dow up 0.25%. I'm looking at the S&P 500 up 0.4%, NASDAQ up 0.3%. You know, look, oil moving a tad higher, but, you know, oil's come down so significantly. I think the moral of the story here is the U.S. is in a very, very good position economically. So even when you see all this craziness going on, even when you see what's happening in the streets, even when we have to worry about whether China's behind this or not, or whether you have some kind of federal breakdown, you really don't. Like, it's actually kind of a lot of noise because the markets are telling you, the markets are very firmly telling you, hey, gold's lower today, right? So it's risk, you know, they're not as concerned with risk. If they were, they'd be buying up gold, but no, they're buying up equities because they're making a bet on the US of A and they're making a bet on Donald Trump. And it's a bet that I think you should make. I know Rob's going to kill me because I'm showing you the wrong portfolio here for the wrong month. But basically, go check out our 76 portfolios because there's just a lot of information in there. Really, really tremendous upside that we've seen in so many of our stocks. You get 5 to 10 stocks in each one of these things. So it's just wonderful to see. I should also let you know that we got a wonderful note from one of our, you can get all 3 portfolios, by the way, as a Founders Club member. And one of our Founders Club members today said, thank you so much because I've been able to actually make a lot of money, a lot of money on you guys, thanks to all of your recommendations. And I'm telling you, this is what it's there for. And I think it can probably make a whole lot more.
Amazing what a rising market will do. Oh, it's going to get a lot higher. In fact, I told people 5 weeks ago, it's a great time to buy. I got criticized for that. Now they don't criticize me anymore. People should have listened. But it's going to go a lot higher. You're going to see, we've never had anything like this happen. It's an explosion of investment and jobs, and great companies are coming in.
Great companies are coming in. Good stuff. I mean, I like it. Hey, you know what else is good? Top 100, top 100. We're climbing. You know, it gets harder, though, as you keep climbing, right? Because you get more scrutiny and all this, that, and the other. So, you know, we were just going gangbusters. What were we, like 7,000 new subs a day? It's gotten a little tricky. We're down to like 700 new subs a day. So I'm asking for your help. Please do what you can. Spread the word. This is the podcast to be listening to. Really and truly, for truth and for measured truth. You know, it's not out of control. It's fair. I think we provide that kind of nuance. Somebody said to me the other day, oh my gosh, Trish, why do you have to keep showing me these clips from MSNBC or CNN? And I'm like, you know what? We need to do that because we need to understand what the other side is saying. And you need to understand when they're blowing it out of proportion or when they're wrong. And then simultaneously, you know, when we're wrong too, we call that out. I think that you just need fairness in this media circle right now. So many of you have responded to that here on this show because that is what we deliver every single day. Don, is it 842? Really? We've got 842,000. I think it just crossed over, right, from 841 to 842. It's just amazing. And David Lorenzo, thank you for the kind words. Peace of my mind is always here. And he's like, the chat is where it's at. The chat. You guys have to hit the bell when you subscribe because that way you know exactly when I am live. It is wonderful to have you. Thank you for all you do. And we're back live again right here tomorrow.